The following content contains personal experiences of our hosts and guests. We are not experts in this matter. We encourage challenging conversations with others and to achieve healing from our childhood. We hope to connect and allow a safe space to have an open discussion. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional, diagnosis, or treatment.
Happy Pride Month!
Happy Pride Month!
It is June.
Happy Pride!
Happy
Month!
Pride!
Happy Pride!
Woo, woo, woo!
Yeah.
Yes.
Be loud and proud.
Be loud and proud.
Love is love. Yeah, we're so excited
Yeah.
to have Dan here with us. Happy Pride.
For the gays, days, the girlies, girly pop, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, first gen listeners, first gen podcasts, feelers, first generation podcasts. Here we are.
Here
Back-
we are.
Back at live here at the Spotify studios. Beautiful Spotify.
Mhm.
We have a marvelous next guest today. I've worked with him for over 6 years now, and he is a delight. He's like the best person you can ever hang out with. He's a life of party. Chambea. He's so cool. Dan,
Woo!
Holla! Oh,
Welcome.
welcome aboard. And actually, he was on our first episode, so welcome back, Dan. Welcome back to the
chambea,
podcast.
chambea.
Always a pleasure. So I'm happy to have you back on this
Love it.
podcast so we can
Yeah.
chat.
T, you have no
Miss ya.
idea. I love you. I love working with you. I love you the most. You're a homie, a day one. Thank you. I'm proud to be back. Oh, what a joy. A joy and an honor.
The feeling is mutual. Feeling is mutual. Thank you for being here. Seriously. And yes, you're like Mr. Worldwide, traveling all over. I don't even know where you're at half the time, but thank you for making time today for us.
Yeah.
Now, you sent the mic to New York, and I was like, I'm going to Miami, so I'll just take it with me. So
It's coming along with me. Yeah.
always on the move, always moving.
Nina, what's our topic today? What are we chatting about?
Yeah. I mean, Dan, I know you're first gen Cuban American. Just curious kind of like what your upbringing was, and also what was it like coming out as a first generation Cuban American? We certainly know, what that would be like if we did that in our family as first generation Filipino Americans. I'm sure there's similarities, but yeah, we'd love to just have you share your story.
But Cuban American, grew up in a Latin household. Comes with like pros and cons in every situation. I feel like being gay and like queer identity and like understanding is one of those that might fall on like the difficult side of it. I feel like, some people come from homes that are very like celebratory, what it means to be like LGBTQ. Some homes are a little less of that. I came from one that was maybe a little less of that. And like, it's just one of those journeys that people go on. And I feel like the older I've gotten, the more it's like it really is someone's own time. So it's like always interesting, I feel like I was having a conversation today actually with my cousin because there are a few like nieces and nephews. And, now it's like you have so much more media that teaches you about like LGBTQ, what it means to be even like pansexual and like this whole journey. And one of the nieces like told her, like my cousin, so it's my cousin's kid, but like not really my niece, but we still call my niece, whatever. She was like, oh, I'm pansexual. And my cousin's like, how do you know you're pansexual if you haven't tried it? Where I'm like, well, is pansexual like the new default in a sense where it's like, sounds like, if you're gay, but it's like, I'm like, well, how do you know if you're straight? Like, what if you haven't, like, everyone's like, have you experimented that whole like conversation? Like, is pansexual the new like figuring it out in a way? Like, I'm just how like this like 14-year-old was describing it to my cousin and what my cousin was relaying it to me. I'm like, that's a really interesting like view, because she was like, well, you haven't tried either. I'm like, well, is like you're attracted to like vibes, energy, regardless of gender, what they're identifying as. So I was like, oh, is pansexual more of this? So it was like a fun conversation me and my cousin had this morning. And like my cousin's always like a huge advocate of like queer rights and like pride and being like must like pride. Like she'd get me all like before my parents knew I was gay. She was like, here's like a pride mustache, like a mustache that was like colorful ornaments for Christmas, like a pride baseball cap, a pride T-shirt, and I was like, you're gonna blow up my spot, like.
Yo.
You're blowing up my spot, but I was like, it was always with the most love. And like, you know, the older
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
gotten,
yeah.
like the more comfortable. When I finally did come out, I'm like, have a pride shirt, wear your pride shirt, wear your pride flag, wear like the pride hat, have your ornaments, like have your cup, have the things that just make you, you know, feel more prideful. Especially if you come from a background where like it's not necessarily always that.
Right.
It's like
Be the authentic self, you know?
be the authentic, bingo, like literally the
Because
authentic self.
yeah, for so long, you know, it's not always black and white. There's all these different flavors now that people are now speaking about, you know. I know it was there before and what have you, but it's just, yeah, the society and culture just shoehorned us into the two choices, you
The
know.
two choices, exactly. It's like I feel like there's so much more under this like beautiful rainbow
Yeah,
that's like what you can,
yeah.
you know, identify as and like, you know, just be like just be at the end
Just
of the
be.
day.
Yeah.
So
Just be you.
yeah.
You
You
gotta
go
be you.
go Terriers, alma mater. Y'all called me again for that money and I was like, I paid my tuition.
uh, so how is it? So you're back home.
Yeah, so I'm
Yes.
back home now because I needed to. It's like a business trip. My mom actually made a pretty funny joke today. I had to like go to get my retainers. I had to go get a license. I had to like see my grandma. I had to like do like business trip.
Ooh,
And I'm telling
yeah.
her, and she's like,
It's a
"You sound like
checklist.
literally a checklist." She was like, "You're one of those South Americans that go back home for like the dentist, the all these like medical
Yeah.
appointments." And I was like, "Well, you're not wrong."
That is awesome. And if you feel comfortable talking about how the journey and process of, you know, with your family's background and expectations and how you navigated that, was it rough? Was it easy to when you did come out finally to your parents and whatnot?
Yeah, I
How was
feel like
that?
expectation is always a big thing. Like, I feel as though I knew I was gay since I was like in a young age, like middle school for sure. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, I find so and so attractive. But I was like, that's probably not what this is. Whatever, like push it off. But I feel like expectation wise is always something that like comes to mind. Like, I remember in high school or something like that, we asked our parents like, how did you choose our names? Blah blah blah. And my mom was like, "Oh, I want to name you Isaac," but we decided on Daniel because we liked that was like a strong masculine name in Spanish. And I'm like, "Well, that's funny, you know, like so you could still be strong and masculine." I'm like, "Well, it's just gay," so like
Yeah, yeah.
that's the outcome. But expectation wise, I feel like that was one thing that like really tripped me up with like you know what I had seen, what I was told you want to like aim for and strive for growing up. That fit like their box of it, but I was like, well, my box looks a little different, you know, different dimensions, however you want to like use a metaphor for it. And like the coming out experience, like when I came out to my mom, it wasn't how I was planning to do it. There was like some family stuff going on, and I was like just like dropping breadcrumbs every time I travel home for work because I would stay here. And in like classic fashion, the kitchen is like where you have the longest conversations with your mom. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. You're like, yo, mom, I gotta go to bed. I'm like here for work. I'm so tired. But like
Yeah.
we're having like some heavy conversation. And she's like, you know, the last few times you come home, you've been like alluding to something. What is it? What is it? I'm like, you know, mom, I'm gay. And this is obviously me saying it now, like so casual. I'm like sobbing my face out the first time I told her.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like really heavy. But I actually came out to like my brother. He was the first person I came out to, and then like my sister like the very next day. My brother was still living at home at the time, and I had come home in like like the first year I was living in LA, so like 2016. And I had gone out with two friends, and I just had like a mental fucking breakdown. Like I had a meant to be at a club, and
No.
I like Uber out of there. My friend, it was a guy and a girl, and he just like sees me in the bathroom, like having a panic attack. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I just like beeline it out, call the Uber, get here, and me and my brother have like a Jack and Jill bathroom,
Mhm.
and I'm in the like you know the toilet, like the sliding door, and he's like in the sink area, and he just like hears me crying. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then like I'm brushing my teeth. He comes back to the bathroom. He's like, "Are you sure you're okay?" I'm like, "I'm fucking fine, bro." Like, still like voice cracking, might crack right now too. And then he goes to his room, and then like 2 minutes later, I like follow behind him. I just like put my head on his, like, he's laying in bed, and I just like put my head on his like stomach. I'm like sobbing, and he like, I was crying so intensely, and he was like, he just goes, "Did you kill someone?" He thought I was.
Oh my gosh.
First thing.
He thought I was drunk driving, and like, it's
Oh.
Miami, like like everybody's like drunk driving. It's terrible. And he was like, I was like, "What?" He's like, "Were you drunk driving?" I'm like, and I'm just like, "No, I'm gay." He was like, "Thank God." He was like, "What a relief, bro."
Yes.
And then we had like that conversation. Then like I told my sister the next day, and when I told my sister, I was like, "I need to have a conversation, just you and I. Like, I want to go over to talk about like work." And my sister's very like HBIC, you know, so she's always like, "You want to talk about work? Like, let's run it. Like, what's like your game plan? Like, let's strategize." And I was like, "Bitch, I'm gonna go talk about work. I gotta tell you some more for you."
Yeah.
And then came out to her then, and then like a little by little, you know, more friends and whatnot. And like each friend, whenever I came out to them, they always like have a reference to it. Like I went to one of my best friend's weddings not too long ago, and like in his like card, he was like, "I could still never go to Milam's, like the local grocery store here, and not walk through the pasta aisle without thinking of like you coming out." Like, whoa. So it's like, you know, and all my friends have been like so supportive, but in all of that too, like a few friends have also been like, "Oof, we know your family. How's this going to be coming out?" And you know what? In Miami, everybody like is Hispanic for the most part. Like my high school, we did I remember in like senior year, junior year of high school, like the highlights was the name of like the journalism paper that would go out. And they were like, "What's your ethnicity?" And everyone was like, or like your background. I always forget how people reference it, but are you like Hispanic? Are you Asian? Are you Black? Are you, you know, whatever it might be, and you check it off. My school was literally less than 1% Asian. It was like 5 to 10% white, and the rest of it was like Black and Hispanic. Like that's just like a perfect demographic of like Miami. So, you know, a lot of my friends were Hispanic, Cuban, Colombian, Brazilian, or Latin, but Brazilian, Argentinian, Cuban, Dominican, Puerto Rican, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of my friends that come from similar backgrounds were like, "What's it going to be like coming out to your parents?" And, you know, like that process of it. And like your dad, again, my dad's like born in Cuba, moved to Venezuela, and was there through he was like 11, moved to Miami here in a time period when like all the Cubans were arriving. And it's like, you know, a self-made person where, you know, he lived with his brother until his brother moved out of the house, and his grandma, they all lived together in a 2-bedroom with parents, grandma, brother. So it was one of those like situations where it's like your grandma was always in your life. So it's, you know, like, and you build yourself on that. It's like very strong man. And like all my friends, like, "Your dad's the most intimidating person I know." And like whenever I'm like, "This man's actually a softie," but like still just that idea of it. And my friends were like, "You're gonna have to come out to your dad. That's gonna be a lot." I'm like, "You know, it is." And funny enough, out of all the people I came out to for like the first like, you know, 2-3 years or whatever, like really good friends and whatnot, when I came out to my dad, it was the first time I actually didn't cry. Because like I'd come out to I'd come out to other friends, and I just like sobbed my face out. And like I came out to my dad, I was like I was like, "Be strong." I'm like, not that like, you know, crying is weakness, or but I just know like in the older generation's eyes, it's like, be sure of yourself. And like if you're being sure of yourself, what is this? Because to me, it was like one of those things where, although I was out to like friends, and like by this time I was already out to like, you know, coworker, like Jess, Adrian, Felipe, Francisco, like everybody knew, like all like I just felt like, you know, I came out to some of them were just like natural, like just, you know, I was gay. But like until I came out to like my parents, that for me was the one where I was like, maybe it's, you know, maybe you guys like feel this way, you know, your parents are immigrants as well, but it's like we overshare so much with our family, and like we don't feel until something's like maybe like official until like you tell mom and dad in this like weird way. I'm not sure what it is, but like I feel like that's a very like POC vibe where it's like we need to tell our parents absolutely all the details of our lives. And I was like, I would hate if like it would come from someone else and not me.
Yeah. Yep.
So to me, it was like very, very important. that I was the one to like tell. And I told my mom, I think it was like a year and a half before I even told my dad. And like they share everything, but she was like, this is one of those things that like I'm not gonna tell your dad. Like you tell your dad when you are ready for it.
That's so beautiful. Your
Yeah.
mom. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. Oh,
My mom's made strides, yo. Like I got clapped up for this lady.
that's so great.
Yeah.
Oh, that is
Yeah.
awesome to hear. And it kind of also sounded like with enough, it just became easier to talk about. One, like, is that how do you
Yeah,
feel
and
like
then-
after
So this is the like this is how I always describe it. Like this is the metaphor I paint for people. If like I always call it the bomb goes off in the city and like it's ground zero. Like it was literally ground zero, like the city was flattened for like a long time with my mom, and like a lot of moments would happen where like you'd say the word gay and it'd be like you just saw like the short circuiting of like their brains not being operated. And like little by little, I'm like, now my mom, it's like I talk about her openly where it's like, oh, she's like, what are you doing? So I'm like, oh, I'm actually going on a date. She's like, oh, like first day. I'm like, no, like fourth, fifth date. She's like, oh, like who is he? Like, what does he do? Like asking the engaging questions that like you want your parents to ask when you say, oh, I'm dating somebody. So like the way I describe it now is like my mom for a while there was like, you mentioned it, it was like city leveled again. Another bomb would go off, another bomb would go off. But now it's like, instead of like there's 10 buildings that suddenly fell, only 5 fell. Now 2 fell, 1 fell. Now it's like an apartment flood. And all of a sudden it's like, it's a leaky faucet. And guess what? Everybody has like a leaky faucet. Like I don't need to worry about it. Like it is what it is. Every now and then the faucet might be a little bit overflowing if it's like a bit of a bigger news. But like it changes. And like my mom has truly been like 0 to 100 with it. And I feel like, siblings play a huge part, or like family plays a huge part. The people that can really like crack their thinking. Because for such a long time, she was always like to my brother, she's like, ay, pero he's gonna get sick. Like, ay, pero this, ay, pero that. And my brother and sister were like, I can get sick. I can meet a terrible person. All these like terrible, like preconceived notions that I feel like people have of a community where I'm like, there's like what you grew up with of like what it means to be gay, like that's not what it is. And like I feel like our media does a huge play in that. Like also she grew up in the 80s, that like the AIDS epidemic and all like the media that you were being consumed by, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like Miami being like a machismo environment just like adds this additional layer always, where I'm like the small-mindedness and like the resistance to want to learn sometimes is what really just like drives the stake further. And I feel like, my mom really has made strides to like learn and do her own research. And she always does her own research, which like I really appreciate. Where if like you say, like if you say something to her and you have a question on it, expect 1 to 2 weeks to like, so I was like reading about it and I saw like X, Y, and Z, which I really appreciate. So like, I like that she's doing her own understanding and like trying to be like, she'll read like a Reddit thread and be like, so I saw another mom was talking about an issue that she was, and like, it's her own online forum to like understand, which I really,
that's so sweet.
Yeah. So it's gotten a lot better. Not to say that there weren't like really hard times, because like I'd be lying if I'm sitting here being like, yo, it was super easy. My metaphor was about a bomb destroying a city. Like, let's not forget that's the metaphor I'm using in this situation. Dad-wise, it's a little harder, but like I think at the end of the day, like, men of a certain generation, they don't express feelings in a way that like we as like people who have therapists would want them to. They show their love by being like, hey dad, I'm going to Home Depot because I'm trying to build something, or I'm looking at this, and he's an architect, and all of a sudden like 10 minutes later I get a sketch with like the exact dimensions of what I should be getting, if I want to get a cut, what I should do. And like I really credit him to like how much I love like DIYs, building stuff, being crafty. So like, I understand his love comes in other ways. Like right now there's a painting at the house. Our aunt and uncle sold their house and they were getting rid of a bunch of stuff. And there's this painting I really liked. And I wanted to fly out with it on Sunday, and I know I can't, it's just not going to work. And I'm like, okay, well, let me try and pack. He's like, don't worry, I want to pack this properly. Like, I want to make sure it's not interrupted. And he's like, already on Monday, I know to expect like a tracking number. Hey, it's coming in on Wednesday, you know? So like, it's just showing love in other ways that I'm like, you know, I really appreciate it. And like, little by little, you want it to be easier where it's like, you know, it's still, his wires still get a little like short circuited whenever I'm like, gay. But like, little by little, it changes and like growth comes a little slower for some folks. And I feel like, you know, all we can ask is at least like we're moving forward and not, you know, digressing. So, you know, you stay hopeful and like it's hard at moments, but ultimately, you know, like I still come home. I didn't get, you know, unfortunately, a lot of folks, you know, don't have the same benefits, like have family in their corner still. Luckily, I didn't lose any family. I didn't lose any friends. And it was one of those situations I'm like, you know, coming out's hard and it really is like everyone's own journey. But, you know, it gets better. It gets easier. You'll like stop caring as much as like, well, what will so-and-so say that I went to high school with? And it's like, well, fuck so-and-so you went to high school with. I'm like,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Like this be like, this is me and take it or leave it. You know?
Exactly.
And I totally hear that with it's like your authentic self, and you've been hiding that from certain people, certain family. I think everyone should just be free to just express, you know?
Sure.
Like the confinement of like, oh, you can't be doing that. Like, I think we've mentioned it in our previous episode, like being in a box, you know, and you're just put in there. When we are multidimensional, there's different things and aspects and makes everyone unique. And just being able to express that, you know, it's just the same thing. It's like, here are my expectations for you and you didn't meet it, but that's them projecting their feelings towards your choices. But like at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And it's growth.
It's totally growth.
And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you, Dan, is like, you know, that growth part, it's painful. And I was just talking to somebody the other day about growth and success. And when you're growing and you're becoming more of your authentic self and showing your authentic self, it can get lonely because to your point, you're going to lose some people. And it's like, fuck whatever people in high school thought. Like, this is who you are. And it can be a lonely and challenging path, but that growth is definitely worth it. So it can be uncomfortable. I'm so happy that, you know, your friends and family have been so supportive and that you are able to go home. I mean, you know, we're big on family as well, as you know, Dan. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious though, I mean, as Filipino Americans could be similar with Cuban Americans, like for our family, somebody comes out, it's like, oh man, like you can't have kids now. Like, what? I won't have grandkids. Or it's like, okay, so are you out just being promiscuous and having sex with her? There's like these stereotypes. And it's like, no, none of that is true, you know? I'm curious if it's like the same with like a Cuban American family.
Well, I mean, we're both colonized by the Spanish, so I feel like we got...
So, yeah.
And religion is involved.
Right, exactly. This is
you
against
know.
God and, oh, don't even get me
Religion is
started.
involved. I mean, luckily, I didn't grow up with like religion too strongly. Like my grandma definitely was, and like my mom, like she's spiritual in terms of like be a good person, you know, try and do good. And I feel like that's kind of why she like made such an effort and like tries to like really like understand and come from it. But I definitely feel like, yeah, it's the whole expectation thing of it all. It's like suddenly your news changes their life, and it's like, well, it doesn't change necessarily. It just like looks a little different, you know, like queer people adopt kids all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Queer
Yeah,
people
exactly.
They could still
have
Yep.
kids pregnant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Find a donor.
There's-
Like
yeah.
there's so many
There's
ways
so many
to do it.
ways. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not, again, the two things like male, female, man and woman. Like there's other ways.
Totally.
You
Totally.
know? And yeah, adoption.
Oh,
Same thing like
totally.
adopting pets. Like you're building your family. It's still fam.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah.
But yeah, I do like the progression of a lot of this is becoming like it's educating the broader population now, you know? And having multiple stories and seeing this in like the big screen now too. It's just like it's being more talked about, and it's making it easier, I think,
For sure. Yeah.
to
I feel like the way it's being talked about too is what's really important because, now there's so much television that talks about being queer, not in this like depressing light, I guess, because for so long, like you see some shows from like the early 2000s or 90s or like 80s or like what people just assume it means to be queer. And it's like AIDS, crazy partying, and like early death. Like for some reason that just like, is really pushed as like this main agenda. And unfortunately, yeah, like the AIDS epidemic really did kind of be like put this like scar on what it is. But I feel like that scar resonated across a whole generation of people where like that's the mindset they have. And I just really enjoy now that like Heartstopper, Heartbreak High, I think that's what it's called, like an Australian queer TV show. You have like G-Force is an animated show. You have RuPaul. You have like all these different. You have I Love Simon. You have like Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like that was a book, then it was turned into a movie. You have all these like different mediums now that really show like it does get better, and like our story isn't just this like sadness that I feel like so many people kind of like saw it as. And yeah, that media I think is still really important. The one that does illustrate the importance, like the hardships of being queer, especially like in the 50s and the 80s, and like understanding why pride exists, and like it started with the brick. And I feel like that's really ultimately like we still need to keep that at the forefront. But I feel like it's important too to understand like the story goes beyond that too. It's like the story starts there, but like the path it takes is so different than like what people understand it as. And like I like if I were in high school when Heartstopper came out, I feel like that would have really allowed me to like come out to friends easier, to be like, you can like have your little close knit of people understand who you are and like be true to them. And like everyone lies in high school who they are. Everyone lies on Instagram who they are. And I feel like if you just have that and you have this like visual of like it does get better, I feel like that makes such a change. And I feel like it builds up the courage to want to come out to your family or like build to like the people that matter, I feel, or just like give you the self-confidence, or not even come out to go, just give you the self-confidence internally. Like I can come out for myself, or I can just be out to myself and like be comfortable there. But I feel like media is a huge part in where the conversation is and like why it's so important to like, accept it and also like recognize it when it comes to like award season and promotion. Like at Spotify, it's like what shows get promoted? The really big shows that have all this money, but it's also like it's important to like give the flowers to the other shows too, to like break this barrier of like who's ingesting it, because like your algorithm's your algorithm. So if I'm only consuming like one narrative and I'm not seeing something else, I feel like it's really important for these companies to be like, okay, let's blast this so that people in the other spheres see it more. And I feel like that's something like you like change minds, change POVs, and change the conversation around it, or like allow somebody to like see a different light in it. I don't want to like dive too deeply into like this comedian, but like Dave Chappelle, he is so known for the transgender like joke and him Legion as like the shtick. There was a show not too long ago in Miami where he actually was like, I'm not going to talk about transgender folks today. I'm going to talk about another marginalized group, folks who are, handicapped, wheelbound, like wheelbound chair, etc. And I was talking to one of my friends and he was like super uncomfortable about it because he has a friend who is wheelbound, and like he was able to kind of see, he was like, those jokes where like, I was like, man, how is my friend going to react to this, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, I'm kind of like relieved that you had that POV because it allows you to understand why the transgender community feels that way. It's like, why do we always need to be a shtick? Because now a community you are closer to is the butt of the joke, and you felt a certain way. Like now imagine if you're the butt of the joke every single time by like one of the most well-known comedians. So I feel like in moments like that, that's where it's important to like opportunity to give you an analogy as to like why is this relevant to you too, and like change this narrative and like your approach. But I know that was like a tangent. But bottom line, I just think it's good to like consume media that like is going to allow you to get the different perspective and be like, a story is a story. Like my interpretation of how so and so lives is like incredibly different, and I just didn't know about that because guess what? I never consumed media that allowed me to see it in such a light.
Right.
Yeah.
Seeing that represented, seeing more underrepresented, communities on the big screen. Even at his daycare, like I dropped him off today, he had books of already like, hey, two moms, oh,
And
there's a book of two dads. And it's not even just like, oh, this is stepfather, dad, and mom. It's literally two women having their own child and two men having their own child. And it's just great to see that that's in a kid's book, like I definitely didn't grow up with that.
I didn't grow
it
up
was
with that
not
either. Yeah.
provided in our household.
and if you live
yeah.
in Florida, you still don't grow up with that because they ban books left and right.
Yeah, the band book.
That's true.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, yeah. It's different for every state.
Yeah.
It's different for every
wherever
state.
you live.
But to your
Ugh.
point, like here, that's so important. I feel like that's the beauty of like living in LA and like these major cities that are like forward thinking, where it's like these are stories for people. Like, bottom line, your son goes to school with a student that very well likely one of them or multiple of them come from same-sex homes, or even if it's not directly their parent, their aunt, their uncle, their cousin,
right,
somebody, their
Someone
neighbor.
you're connected to.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like normalize that. And everyone in Florida, everyone's like, well, why do you got to show it so young? And I'm like, well, because like it's life. It's the exposure so young too.
This is the world right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
And
real.
I feel,
This is real.
I just feel like people have this perception, like it's so crude. It's like, oh, it's a book about like two men or two women that are parenting. Like, is this book going to talk about like their sex life? Does any children's book talk about a sex life? No.
Right.
It talks about like, I scraped my knee and like my mom came and helped me, and then other mom came along and blah, blah, blah. And then there's a monster under my bed. Dad 1 came in a little while longer. Dad 2 came in. Like, it's children's stories. You just...
Yeah. It's the same like morals and stories.
Right. Yeah.
But different parents.
Yeah.
Different parent combinations.
Oh my God. The Berenstein Bears.
Uh-huh.
And we make the Berenstein Bears modern day, and it's just bears as the dads.
Just bears. Yeah.
IP this one, yo. I'm calling this one. I'm keeping this one.
Oh, I love it.
Get that
Write
copyrighted.
it down.
You'll be a writer in the next occupation.
Yeah.
Dan.
There you go.
Thank you.
Write it up. Changing the world.
Yeah. And I think changing the world and sharing stories is so important. And that's why Tiff and I decided on this podcast. We're like, there's got to be a way to spread awareness. There's got to be a way to get people to heal. And I think it's by sharing our stories and sharing where we came from and our experiences. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'm older than you guys, but it's like, yeah, when I was growing up, like, definitely no books on like same-sex, parenting or anything like that. And actually, my mom, when she was growing up, she was taught that being gay was a disease. I mean, it was literally in the DSM-4 back then, and she is a very progressive woman. She's very, she stands up for like women's rights, and she's learned a lot throughout that journey. But having that upbringing, of course, like coming to America, there were certain things that we were taught as children, like, oh yeah, like being gay is bad, like that's a disease, And so thankfully, like, she's come around, and just the influence from really great leaders that I've had in my life has really helped me. Because imagine being in a small city from Minnesota, and just staying in that bubble. Like, I don't know what would happen to me. So I'm very fortunate, but it's hearing everyone's stories, I think, that's really opened my eyes and helped me to become open-minded. So that's why I love what we're doing here, what you're doing, Dan, and sharing your story and your journey as well.
I
Yeah.
feel like that's key though. It's the sharing of stories that allows people to like challenge their own belief that like, oh, that's such a valid story, an authentic story. Like maybe I should like dig into it a little more. So kudos to you. Kudos to Minnesota for breaking you trying to break the bubble there.
Breaking that bubble. But yeah, it's storytelling. And then again, like you said, it's normalizing it, you know? And I don't know what your thoughts are on, you know, I love that we're celebrating so many things. I know there's days for certain foods, like, oh, this day is for chicken wings and what have you. But like, there's months now dedicated to certain communities. Like, again, we didn't grow up with that.
Nope.
And it's great to see that these things are now coming to light and that we are here. We are here, proud to celebrate. You know, yourself, just being you.
Totally.
And yeah, be loud and proud.
We're here, we're queer.
Love it.
Okay.
Dan, seriously, thank you for sharing
Thank you.
your story
Of course.
with
Thank
us.
you for letting me to share. First time I've ever done this on a podcast. I was like,
oh my gosh.
I was like, this in itself is like a growth, you know? Like I'm like, you grow with it. You grow with it. You can't, if you stay in the same size pot, your roots are gonna get root bound. You gotta let your roots grow further, baby.
Right.
Grow further, do what makes you uncomfortable.
Keep growing,
Push it.
growing out and up.
Yep.
Don't stay in that same little pot, the same box, you know?
Yeah.
Thrive.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Grow and thrive.
Grow and
Facts.
thrive.
But again, seriously, thank you for opening up and sharing your story. I'm hoping also it can resonate and inspire others as well. Awesome.
Right on. Well, thank you guys for having me. This was honestly so sweet. I love what you guys do with this. I think it's important that first gen understands that's like okay to break what's culturally acceptable or what you were told is culturally acceptable, despite the hardships and whatnot. Get that tattoo if you want it.
Quote by Dan. Yes. Yes.
Doesn't
seriously.
make you any less.
Doesn't make you less than. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's it.
I want to
yeah.
get a tattoo right after this.
I know. Yo.
Chambea!
Chambea. 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 All right.
I love it. Thanks,
Appreciate
team.
ya. Thank you all for joining us this episode. Thanks for listening, watching on Spotify. Please give us 5 stars, like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram at First Gen Podcast. There's a bunch of underscores.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll put it
First-
right here.
_Gen_podcast. Give us a shout, like, comment. Yeah. What was your last queer content that you've watched? We'd like to hear.
Yeah. Send us a DM and let us know.
Thanks for listening. Until
Thank
next
you.
time.
See you next time.